And we'll talk about how to manage some of those risks in a certain section. I also thought it would be kind of useful, time permitting, to maybe talk about some of the tools and services companies can use to help with this transition. Because I was talking to an acquaintance of mine, actually Sean from down at Apex, and he had asked me the one day, he goes, "Hey, how are you? Like, I called your office phone and you mentioned you're at your house. How are you doing that?" So I just wanted to talk about how we at AutoStar are handling some of those like technical challenges. Some of those things aren't necessarily security focused 100%, but I thought it might be interesting and useful. And maybe we can give you some things that you haven't talked about. And then we'll hopefully have a little bit of time for Q&A. So I'm hoping that I'll talk probably till about 1:45 or maybe 10 to 1. And then I'll give some time for questions if there are any at the end as well. Okay, so for background, a little bit about how did we get here? This was my idea of a graphic, by the way, for explaining the fact that you know, someone somewhere ate a bat and now you need to invest in a VPN, and how do I get from there to here? In terms of remote workers, up until about a month ago, if I asked most people, whether you were in management for organizations or certainly IT, to think about remote workers, you probably did not have in mind what is going on right now. You probably thought about employees who traveled, so salespeople and executives who would go on the road, and you know, in IT we call those road warriors, right? So these are people who go out, and chances are they might be out for a week or two at a time, but then they're back in the office. Now with COVID-19 going on, there has been a pretty sudden and dramatic shift in a really short amount of time. Because the first big shift is we don't just have salespeople, we've got everybody, or in a lot of companies, many people, if not all, working remotely from home. And it's not a week or two. This is kind of, it sounds like sort of for the foreseeable future. We don't know whether it's going to be another 6 weeks or 6 months, and we're just kind of, everybody's dealing with it as we can. And this change has been thrust onto organizations with very little notice. Anecdotally, I think actually most organizations have handled this really well, much better than I would have anticipated, and I think much better than most people would have thought. If you got a bunch of executives from different companies in a room, and even IT people, and said, "Hey, within about a 2-week span, we're going to have all these businesses have just about everybody working from home, who can at least, you know, office workers certainly. And is this possible?" And I think a lot of people would have told you it's not possible, it's not achievable, there's going to be too much challenges for that, it's just not doable. But I think most organizations have actually handled it really well. If you look at, you know, the companies that, or the organizations I'm involved with, so at AutoStar, myself, and I work with a team of 2 other network sysadmin type people. And, you know, we were kind of talking about this maybe about a week or 2 before it happened. We said, you know, the way I think it's going, guys, I think we might end up all working from home. And there were still some people in the news and various organizations that said, no, that's not going to happen. But we said, maybe we should start thinking about it. And within about 2 weeks, all of a sudden we were told, well, you have to make everybody work from home. And I know Medicine at College was much the same way. We were told, you know, at one point on a Friday afternoon, there's no plans to shut the college, we're still going to be in classes. And then it was Sunday afternoon, 2 days later, where word came down from the province that, gee, I guess we are going to be working remotely. And most organizations have handled it really well. Anecdotally, I think the ones who had a good IT presence have probably, it's been a little bit easier for them. So I know, speaking of the college, like we went in the next day, that Monday following, where they announced that this was going to be shut down. And we met with our dean, along with all the other people in our division. And he said, how soon can we be teaching remotely? We have to be teaching remotely. And the answer from, you know, I was teaching the IT program, we said, well, us and our students could start today. They ended up transitioning the college within a week to remote, which is amazing given the circumstances. So It's been overall, I think people have handled it quite well. And the one other good thing is that a lot of companies are giving away products and services to assist with this transition, or they've got very good introductory offers. We'll talk about some of those as we go that can help. So let's talk about the risks that are available. And I mentioned those 4 risks. So let's get into the first one. So the first risk that I want to talk about is fraud, ransomware, and phishing. Now you would hope, this might be a good time, by the way, for poll question 2. You would hope that criminals would take a look at the current situation, that, you know, the economy is really taking a big hit. There's people obviously very sick and dying, and you would think and hope that criminals would kind of go, you know what, now's not the time that we should be preying on people. But if anything, the risks have gone up substantially. And they seem to really be taking advantage of the situation. So you can see here on the screen, there's an article from the Wall Street Journal. Cyber criminals sweep in to take advantage of coronavirus. And that is, in fact, what researchers have been seeing, is there's been a huge ramp up in ransomware, fraud, and phishing attacks. Just a little background, by the way, probably a lot of you know what phishing is when I talk about phishing. Phishing is sort of a fraudulent attempt to get sensitive information, and good examples would be things like usernames or passwords or credit card details or, you know, social insurance numbers, by disguising oneself as a trustworthy entity in electronic communication. So you get an email that purports to be from maybe your boss or maybe a government organization saying, please go here and fill in this form. And phishing is something that they'll use to get your credentials, to get your data, and hopefully, ultimately for them, to steal from you, hopefully not for you. So, oh, we've got a poll result here. So the question was, do we have some employees using their personal devices to work from home? And 72% said yes. We do have some, you do have some employees using their personal devices to work from home. So that'll come up as we go through here as well.
Sorry,
so,
I wasn't sure what I was doing with the polls to begin with. So the first poll, 67% have some employees working from home for the first time, just so you know the results of the first poll.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. I see that over on the screen. Okay, great. So there's an article, by the way, I did see someone ask if the slide deck will be available later, and it definitely will. And I've got these notes and links in the slide deck. But from the National Observer newspaper in Canada, what they're observing is a 4,000% increase in ransomware emails. And for other countries, we've heard much the same. So Kaspersky, which is a big cybersecurity research firm, looked at South Africa, was one of the countries they looked at. And typical attacks per day were 30,000. That had climbed to 310,000. So a 10-fold increase. And that was just over the course of March. And the numbers were going up. They also noted, if you look at computers that sort of scan the internet, just looking for vulnerabilities, and that's what happens. That number had gone up from their count from 2,600, and this is for one specific vulnerability. So 2,600 computers on the internet looking for one specific vulnerability per day to 3,450. So, you know, a 50% increase. And one of the reasons why this is ramped up is there's just more opportunities right now for the bad actors that are out there. This is both in terms of targets and in terms of money. There's money being distributed for various government programs and things like that. So these guys want to get a hand on some of that money. So a quick example, this is a text message that was going around that you may have seen or heard about in the news. And the text message says, in response to the recent shortage of surgical masks, the Red Cross will be giving 1 free box per household. Visit http://redcross-facemask.ca to get yours. So this is a good example of a phishing attempt. And by the way this face mask scam works is if you go to that link, you get prompted, and it looks like a real Red Cross website. They've got the logos, they've got everything up. And then they say, well, maybe you'd like to make a donation to pay for these masks or pay for the shipping. And so you would put in your credit card details, and of course, you're never ever going to get these masks. You'll likely then, they may even have your credit card details, which is a further problem. Someone had asked, was this HTTP or HTTPS? I took the actual one that was going around, so they were sending HTTP. If it was HTTPS and you'd gone there, now it's a secure page that you're putting your credit card data in, but you're still putting your credit card data in. One thing to note, anyone can register these domains like this. So I can easily register a domain. Like I could register http Canada-CERB-GC.ca, right? And for those of you, some people might look at that and go, well, there's the GC in there for Government of Canada. This looks legit. But because I put -GC, it would be totally possible and easy. It would cost me less than $20 to register that domain, create a real looking government website where I get people to go in and put their information. The second reason, by the way, that these are going around is people are really panicky and nervous right now. They're inexperienced in remote work. So, I know a lot of people, if they saw this kind of face mask scam go around, they would be very interested. Obviously, there were a lot of people looking for masks. So be very aware of phishing scams and ransomware and these kind of things, especially because people are nervous, your employees and possibly yourselves. The other thing with employees are outside of the normal environment and normal controls that you set. And so, normally if I'm in the office, I have rules. I have in-person confirmation of instructions. So if I ask our accounts payable person to pay something, I ask her, like, come and see me, or I will come see you in person. That's difficult to do right now. And email confirmation is very problematic. It's easy to spoof emails. The expression is, that I heard from our lawyers is, you may not be able to do wet signatures, meaning like, somebody doesn't come into your office and get you to physically sign something on a check. And yeah, they were referring to that as wet signatures. I was thinking after Justin Trudeau's speech, we should change that to moist signatures, but apparently wet signatures are very difficult to do right now. So just use common sense with regards to fraud, ransomware, and phishing. There's an acronym REST that we use. R is if it has a request for personal information, that's a warning sign. E is for emotion, like if you get something, like we'll see on the next screen, something that appeals to your emotion, or even this one, hey, you'll get some masks, watch out. S, watch out for spelling, same as grammar, right? Often phishing will have sort of some spelling or grammar errors. And T is just think before you click. There was a question, what is up with the dot between the slashes? Formatting between the underline. Yes, I think that is just formatting from the underline. That dot is right here in between the two slashes. I think that's just because it was underlined, and in the screen grab I took, that was an example. Two other quick examples of ransomware and phishing that are going along right now, and you'll see things like this. So the first is, a text message. We'll talk about this first. It says, as COVID-19 is spreading, we have locked your debit card for safety. Please sign in to regain use. So I know a lot of people who would see that and go, what do you mean you've locked my debit card? Like, I need to pay with that, especially if it's got my contact list right now. And so they're trying to lure you in to click on that link and put in, presumably a bank and bank card information and PIN information, which is bad. I love how they even, in this one, they tried to be sneaky and put this little weird looking reference in there, because let's face it, that is something that you would see on a message from a bank. And then we've got one here, supposedly from the Public Health Agency of Canada, which, by the way, you'll note if you pay attention, Public Health Agency of Canada is sending an email from support@jerseyswow.com, which you'd go, that doesn't necessarily make sense. And it says on March 17th, dear parents and guardians, we're ready to provide you an update from a Public Health Agency of Canada with regards to the novel coronavirus. please click this link. And if I click that link, I'm going to go to a website, which is going to infect my browser. Maybe it'll prompt me to download a Word document or a PDF, which are also ways to infect your computer. And so be conscious of the fact that, you know, this has not gone away. And in fact, it really has increased. Also with these, by the way, some of these, they're trying to be sneaky with, you know, they'll put in something that says urgent update for Medicine Hat. Well, it's not hard to get email lists, or, you know, certainly if you're on the web and you go to a website, it is not hard to use geolocation to, you know, see what city you are in. That's why if you've ever been on the internet and you see, oh, there's singles available in Medicine Hat, it shows a couple pictures. You will see the exact same singles available when you happen to be in Toronto. And it's just because they clearly just take whatever city you show up as and just put that city name in there as a little filler. And if you haven't seen those ads, you clearly go to different websites than I do, I guess. Okay, let's move on. So the next risk that I want to talk about is untrusted clients. And the COVID-19 situation has really accelerated a previous trend of BYOD, bring your own device. And that's the trend of people wanting to bring their own devices into corporate trusted networks. And so a lot of IT people like me were really trying to resist this in a lot of ways. Of BYOD, because it can be dangerous. But now we're unfortunately in the situation where maybe your employees are forced due to the current situation to use their own equipment, because you may not have enough equipment to give people to work from home. Even if you do have enough equipment, maybe they choose to use their own equipment when they want to work from home. I'll bring up an example. So this is my setup at home. So I've got, you know, 3 giant monitors that I can use. And, you know, if you were to ask me, hey, AutoStar could give you a laptop and it would probably have a 15-inch screen, or, you know, I could use my existing setup. I'm going to choose the existing setup every time. And, you know, I don't blame people for wanting to do that, but the risk to an organization is you have to ask yourself, are those devices secure? Do they have updates applied? Are they firewalls? Do they have antivirus? If they're infected, so if you've got home devices that are connecting to your corporate network and those devices are infected, is it possible that those devices can then reach across and start infecting things on your corporate network? Absolutely, that's possible. And so there's definitely a risk there. So that's kind of risk number 2. And where you see that a lot is if it's a personal device, what if it's one of these older operating systems like Windows 7 or Vista or XP? And by the way, if you're still running XP, please call your IT provider immediately this afternoon and ask them to get you off of XP. But even Vista and Windows 7 has support ended. So there are now security holes for Windows 7 that are not patched by Microsoft and will never be patched. In my class at the college, by the way, we go through an exercise. We just had it. It's always toward the end of the year, where I give them some target computers to essentially hack. And I always get asked, Mike, why are you giving us, like, one of these computers is Windows XP? And I go, yeah, I'm giving you XP because it's easy. And for your first computer that you're going to hack, I want you to basically have a 100% chance of getting into that computer. And one way to do that is XP. So if they're old, if they're a pirated operating system, which you'll sometimes see on personal equipment, that's going to create a problem, because often those pirated ones don't get updates if they've already been compromised. And by the way, I've been talking about PCs. Phones and tablets are in the same boat. For someone who's running, you know, a Galaxy S6, it's not getting updates either, and it might be accessing your data. Now, depending on how sensitive your data is, this can be a big problem when people are running stuff at home. Think about a scenario, for example, with removable drives. Maybe, you know, Mike works at home. He backs up his machine at home, and he happens to, oh, we've got a poll question, by the way. Do you know if the employee's home devices are secure? I'll just close that on my side. And, you know, if Mike has sensitive data that he's been working on at home, and then he plugs in a drive, like I've got one right here, So it's just a little like removable hard drive, or it could be a thumb drive or anything like that. You don't know from an organization standpoint if that drive is encrypted. And if Mike ends up putting sensitive data on that drive and then loses it or gives it away, you are now in a position of data breach. So some companies will say, for example, you can't use personal devices unless they meet certain criteria, like a supported operating system, maybe hooked up to a centralized software for management, and we'll talk about those. Some of those aren't great though. There's technical and HR issues with that in Canada, potentially. Here we can see the results. Do we know if the employee's home devices are secure? And this is, to be honest, what I would have expected. 40% of people said yes. That actually might be higher than I would have anticipated. 60% of people said no, they're not sure. I did get a question too. If you click on the link, does it automatically infect your computer? And the answer is, it depends. So it depends if you've got all your Windows updates on, if you've got antivirus. And sometimes when you click the link, it asks you to download a Word document or a PDF. It depends how good the bad guys are. There's certainly a good chance though. And yes, sometimes if you go to some web pages, can a web page infect your computer? Yes, it's happened in the past. Good skilled attackers can have it happen in the future. Let's move on. The next risk is device and data theft. Now this is not just an issue of equipment loss. You know, I always tell people at AutoStar when I give them kind of security pep talks and meetings and things like that, that, you know, if your laptop was stolen, I really probably don't care about the laptop very much anyway. What I care about is what data on there. And the data is what we care about. And to note, there's not a COVID-19 holiday from privacy regulators. So if you have an employee who's been working from home and has a laptop or removable media, like I talked about, and that gets physically stolen, you now have a data breach. And when you hear about cases, by the way, I talk to my students, I say, when you hear about cases like they say Alberta Health Services lost immunization records for 100,000 people due to a data breach, chances are in many cases, that's not somebody breaking into the AHS network and stealing vaccination records. It is somebody who works in that area who had a laptop or a thumb drive that they left in a coffee shop or a cab or just had it stolen. And so we have to worry right now with people working remotely, the risk of things getting stolen. And privacy regulators are not giving exceptions because of COVID-19. You know, you can manage physical security at your office. You know, at our office, we've got key fobs to get in, we've got cameras, but I don't know what people have at their house and if that's secure, or, you know, certainly post COVID-19, you know, people working in coffee shops and things like that. So the privacy regulations we still have to look to follow if we're in Canada are PIPEDA for most organizations. That's for private businesses that are required to have privacy standards in how they collect and handle data. There's also provincial regulations, like in Alberta we have PIPA. And so we've got to watch out for those laws. And if your organization does do business somewhere else, like so my company does work internationally, and we do have to think about privacy laws in other areas. So in Europe, you've got the GDPR law, or in California, you've got the California Consumer Privacy Act. Just to note, speaking of breaches and privacy regulators and things like that, one note is that in Alberta, we have mandatory breach reporting to the Alberta Privacy Commissioner in all cases of a breach. So even if the standard in the rest of Canada is you have to report it if you think there's a reasonable chance that any one person would be harmed. In Alberta, even if there's no risk of harm, you still have to report breaches, or else you're in violation of the law. And you can be fined, or I think, you know, there's other things privacy commissioners can do. So you're always required to report in Alberta, and you're always even federally required to retain a record. Now there are solutions out there. What I'm going to talk to when we get to the solution side for this is you can encrypt devices using full disk and strong encryption. I had one of my students, and we do lots of password cracking in the class I teach, and he said, hey, you know, I've got this laptop and it's encrypted with Microsoft BitLocker, which is one of the tools that I'll talk about, the solutions. How hard would it be to crack that? And I said, very, very, very hard. Like, you know, it's one of those things where plug in your really powerful computer and you might get that password somewhere between now and 20,000 years. You might get lucky and maybe you'll get it tomorrow. You might get unlucky and it might be 20,000 years. So some of the solutions out there are not too bad. There are solutions for this. One thing I will caution you on, don't trust end users to do their own crypto. It's a bad idea to get them to do their own crypto because they're probably going to do it wrong. And then I know if you do encrypt devices, how are the recovery keys stored? Chances are an end user is not going to keep the recovery key for that device. So you probably don't want end users doing that. That really is something that management and IT should be in charge of. I'll give you an example. So if you encrypt drives with BitLocker, it gives you, I believe it's a 48 character string that this is the recovery key for it. So it's not just your password, it's sort of the emergency password. And you have to store this. And we've gone through some years in the class I teach where I get them to do this, and they get this password and they try and save it onto the hard drive that they're encrypting. And Windows is smart. It won't let you save that recovery password on the hard drive that you're encrypting, because that would be kind of like building a vault and having your emergency set of keys put inside the vault. It just doesn't make sense. So of course it doesn't let you do it. So, you know, users are going to probably do dumb things like that, like I wrote it down on a piece of paper, and they probably got things wrong.
Ivan,
yeah.
can you see the Q&A?
I can. And I see Lisa's comment. She can't see the poll questions because it's pop-ups. That could be. Yeah, sorry about that. If you have security turned on, that is possible. Yeah, sorry. There's probably not a good solution for that. And I also see a question from Sharon. Is there a way an employer can do a test to determine whether a computer on the network is compromised? Yes, there is some management software which at least gives you a good opportunity to see if the network is compromised. Like, you know, nothing is foolproof. I always use the example because I'll get asked by my bosses at times. They're like, are we hacker proof? Like, could hackers get in? And I go, look, hackers get into the CIA. So I'm pretty sure if they can get into the CIA, they're going to be able to beat my security. But we'll try and make it as difficult as possible. And people are often looking for low-hanging fruit, and hopefully they just move on. If you've got somebody super dedicated, it's tough to tell, but yeah.
There's another question in here in the Q&A. Are we seeing an increase in hardware virtualization and VDI software being used by organizations? And is there inherent risk to using HTML5 viewer over a VPN?
That's a really good question. So I have not seen an increase yet, but I think the only reason that is, so what the question is asking is sort of scenarios where I'm going to buy a big server in my office, and that is going to do virtual desktops over the internet and over a VPN for my users. Because we're so new in this, I haven't seen reports from either Dell or HP or Lenovo or any of the big companies that their sales on these devices have really gone up yet. But I think it's probably just too early. Like, you know, maybe somebody inside those organizations know. It would not surprise me at all if we have seen an increase in that. And is it secure? Generally, like if you're going with a commercial solution, and we'll talk about some of these, and you're doing VPNs and virtual desktops in a couple of different ways, including over HTML5, yeah, that can certainly be secure. There was also a question to share data between employees or clients, how secure things like OneDrive, Google Drive, or others. Those are actually all relatively secure and good. So I've used Dropbox, I've used Google Drive, all of them use TLS for the data in transit. So that we have the concept of data in motion and also data at rest. And at least when that data is in transit between employees' computers, you're good. Now, when it gets to the individual computers it's on. It's going to be dependent on if that computer is encrypted when the data is at rest. But overall, they're actually pretty good. I encourage people to use services like Google Drive and Dropbox, and they've done a pretty good job at that.
One of our attendees has a question. I'm just going to allow them to ask you.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Is this the one from Benjamin?
No, this is Chun Hai Ho. I've unmuted you, maybe? Nope, doesn't seem to want.
Maybe his mic's not working.
Maybe not. If you could just type your question in, we can answer it that way.
Yep. Benjamin also asked, is there a good place to keep your encryption key for your computer? Yes. So the best place is manage that corporately and have sort of a central server at the office that manages those crypto keys. That's the best way. And then that gets backed up for everyone. If you are doing it individually, like let's say I've got my computer at home and I install Microsoft BitLocker on it, one of the options it gives me a couple options. One is to print something, or the other option is you can save it to, this is a really big example, but it probably works well considering I'm on the camera, just a USB key. So you can save to a USB key and the encryption key that way. But the best way is have your IT guys manage that. Okay, next risk is untrusted networks. Really, if you ask me what is the network I trust, the only network I trust is the network at AutoStar, because I helped build it. I know the others who did build it as well, the other two guys, and at least one of those guys is really good. So I really trust that network because I have good visibility on it. I know what's going on. I don't even really trust my home network 100% because, you know, I don't have, you know, at AutoStar, a 12-year-old aspiring hacker installing software on computers. But on my home network, I do. At AutoStar, I don't. So I trust the AutoStar one more. And probably your organization is like that too. You probably trust your work network more than anything else. So the problem is, how do we get employees to our networks, our corporate ones, securely? Even like before social distancing and again after social distancing, there's issues like fake and insecure Wi-Fi. So people who are in a coffee shop, there's these nice devices. I have one, it's great, called a Wi-Fi Pineapple. And the job is to basically throw up fake Wi-Fi, possibly even blocking the legitimate coffee shop Wi-Fi. And then all that traffic goes through this little device and you capture all that traffic and then you can do things with it. And some of those things include data theft, ransomware, and stolen credentials. Just a note, we're going to get to VPNs. And people sometimes confuse consumer grade VPNs, for example, NordVPN, you might have seen ads for it, with business VPNs, and they're two different things. And I'll talk about why. One note, if you're on insecure networks, it is not super hard. I see actually some of the people attending today are some of my current and former students that I've had. And these guys have all been in labs where we are on a network and because we're all on the same network, we can make it insecure and we can steal credentials, and it's pretty easy. The tools and techniques are well understood. So you want to make sure you're on a secure network. Okay. So now that I've scared the heck out of you.
Ivan, it looks like Matt wants to try to ask a question. So let's see if that works. Sorry, I apologize to everyone. Sure. I am trying out this as a new platform. So yep. I'm using Ivan as a bit of a guinea pig.
It's good, it gives me a coffee break.
Is that going to allow you to talk, Matt? Oops. It doesn't seem to want to let me unmute anyone. So I'm thinking because I brought them in muted, it doesn't do that. Sorry, Matt, you're going to have to type your question. I apologize.
Sorry about that. Okay, so let's talk about maybe some of the solutions. Now that I've scared you, what can I give you to hopefully make you feel a little better? So the first solution to manage risk, I've got kind of 3 slides for managing risk. So the first solution is use a VPN. So a VPN, Sandra mentioned before we started, you know, what is a VPN? And a VPN, if you look at the diagram here, is a virtual private network. So think about your remote computer that's at someone's house, and then you've got your office network over here. In between these two things is an unsafe network, which is the internet. There is no more hostile network in the world than the internet, right? There's a line from the original Star Wars movie where I think Obi-Wan says, "Oh, you'll never see a more wretched hive of scum and villainy." That is either Twitter or just the internet in general. And what a VPN does is, imagine that you could build a secure tunnel that your traffic flows through. And once it goes into the tunnel at this side, it can't be either read or altered by anyone on the insecure network that it goes through. So the real world analogy I would always use is, imagine that I was in Medicine Hat and I needed to get to Calgary. But in between and maybe all around Calgary are bad people, right? Bandits who would, stop me and steal from me and things like that. Basically, a VPN is the equivalent of building a tunnel that cars drive through and that nobody from the outside can attack inside that tunnel. That's essentially what a VPN is. For most organizations, the best bet in terms of what is going to be the easiest, safest, best idea for a VPN is going to be one that's built into your main firewall. So if you have a decent firewall at your office, there's a good chance it has a VPN capability built in. And then what you do is you give the VPN client to the people who have remote computers. They would sign into the firewall. And then for them, it's just like being on your regular network. A couple of notes, if your firewall doesn't support VPN connecting through it, so if it doesn't have that capability, there are several of them are free software alternatives, such as OpenVPN and WireGuard, that an IT person can install on a computer inside your network, and then rather than connect to your firewall, the people from outside can securely connect through your firewall to that computer and use some of that software. And there's some of it's free and good. OpenVPN and WireGuard are both really good. There's also some kind of paid for commercial options available if your IT people want something that's a little more, I'll call it pointy and clicky. Because some of these they're not terrible to set up, but they do take some experience. And I noticed I said good IT people, and unfortunately, like anything else, not every IT person is great. You should always, always, always use a VPN if you're going to use services connecting to your office remotely, such as remote desktop or soft phones, some of the things I'm going to talk about. The alternative, what some people do is they have a firewall here and they just say, well, we'll just open up ports on the firewall so that, Ivan or Joe or Sandra can connect to their computers remotely. And we'll open up those ports and then they connect to those computers remotely. That is a really bad idea, because what happens is there's sort of this, I'll call it internet background radiation happening, where people are scanning for those connections at all times. And you will get, within 24 hours, you will have hundreds or thousands of login attempts. And they just go through a dictionary file. They try, the admin username and then every word in the dictionary. And then they'll try, Mike as a username and every word in the dictionary, and Sandra. And eventually they're going to get in. And in fact, there was an issue earlier, it was late last year, with Microsoft Remote Desktop, where even if they didn't have the password, there was sort of a way in. Same thing was with phones. So a VPN protects you from that, because basically you set it up so somebody has to be on your VPN first. Then and only then can they connect in with this remote desktop. And that's definitely the way you want to do it. The other thing I'll note with VPNs, you should have a very, very strong preference for multi-factor authentication. And multi-factor authentication is a combination of at least two of these three things. Something like a PIN or a password. Something you have, like a key fob or a smartphone. Or something you are, like a fingerprint or a retina scan or DNA. Let's take something you are out of it, because that's tough to do remotely. I'm not probably going to have a retina scan at each person's house. So you're down to two things, something you know and something you have. You want to make sure that your VPN solution requires both of those things. And a good real world analogy, again, think about taking money out of an ATM machine. I need two things. I need the physical card, right? Something I have. And I need the PIN, something I know, right? That's a good example of two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. By the way, two things I know. Oh, I have to have a password to the VPN and a password to my computer. That is not multi-factor authentication. Because chances are, if somebody can get my password to the VPN, they can also get my password to my computer or that server. So I've got a good solution for multi-factor authentication. I can give you the one AutoStar uses. It's called a company called Duo We don't sell duos, but this is just my personal recommendation. They're pretty cheap. They charge us $90 a month for 30 users. And they've got many multi-factor authentication options. So if I were to connect to my AutoStar VPN, I need my password. And then also my smartphone will ding. And I have to click a button. It says, you know, this is a duo notification. It seems like you, Ivan, are trying to log on to AutoStar right now. Is this really you? And I have to click yes on my phone, and then it lets me in. So somebody would have to have my password plus my phone, which is going to be tough. The other reason, by the way, I don't consider, I should note this, consumer VPN is not a good solution because they don't get you, in that analogy of Metasnap to Calgary, the job of a consumer VPN like Nord or any of those like that is they get you out of your house, but then they dump you somewhere else on the internet, maybe Toronto, maybe Chicago, maybe Zurich, maybe London. But then you still have the big bad internet to get through, to get back onto your corporate network. So a corporate VPN gets you all the way onto this private network. But one of the consumer VPNs, the whole job with them is just that somebody can't sniff you traffic leaving your house. But imagine if I said, okay, you need to get to Calgary securely. I'll take you as far as Strathmore, or maybe I'll take you to Red Deer and drop you off. Well, you'd still have to worry about, how am I going to get from there to Calgary? Right? So that it just doesn't work, those ones. So regardless of which consumer one it is, I know there was a question about NordVPN versus Bitdefender. They're probably for home use purposes and for, you know, doing your online banking if you're in a coffee shop, all good ideas. For a corporate solution, not great, unfortunately. I should know, if you really want to be secure, you can buy these devices, and they're not super expensive. This one, I went last night and I looked. It was $109 on Amazon, and there are some cheaper ones. This is like a hardware VPN that I would install. So the way this works is I would give it to Ivan. He would take to his house and he would plug into his network. And then whatever laptop or even a wireless device, you can see this device has wireless, that goes into this, it's like it basically sets up the tunnel for you. So then whatever laptop or device that I'm using never actually goes on that untrusted network. It plugs directly into this, and this, the first thing it does when it powers on is it builds that secure tunnel, and then I connect to that. So there are some hardware device options, and this is really small, by the way. I guess that picture makes it probably look really big, but it's smaller in terms of kind of length and width than my cell phone. It would probably be about yay big, right? So not a big device and just a couple of inches thick. So that's an option too. For managing risk number 2, the best bet for employees is, if you can, so I said to the extent possible, enterprise-owned equipment is the way to go. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. The management side, you can use encryption easily on all devices. Now, when we talk about encryption, there's a couple of solutions out there. Oof, I need to go fast. So for Windows computers, Microsoft BitLocker, which is included in everything but the Home Edition of Windows. So it's included with Pro, Enterprise, Education, and it will encrypt the entire device. And it's really good encryption. Mac OS in the newer versions, Catalina, like 10.15, has File Vault, which is very similar. And basically, these encrypt the whole computer. If that laptop or whatever got stolen, you know, somebody, if they went to power it on and they didn't have the password when it boots up, they cannot get any of the data. So your data is secured as an organization. You've done your due diligence on those devices. One of the things that this kind of ties into the question somebody had, what about doing remote desktop? Yeah, this is a great idea. So what you should have is a policy that says, look, don't have sensitive data on your remote devices. Like I'm on my home computer when I'm working from AutoStar, don't have sensitive data on my home computer. Instead, I connect to our VPN. And then after I'm connected to our VPN, I remote into my own office computer that sits there. And all that sensitive data still stays physically on my office computer. It's never on my home computer. So those are good options. And if you've got a VPN, that's good. You know, you can use some things like TeamViewer and stuff like that as well. Those aren't as good, but they're probably better than nothing. Some of them come with their own security issues as well. What else should we talk about here? Managing risk 3. So the next thing is, when you talk about this, kind of addresses a lot of the phishing and maybe the kind of data management. You've really got it, probably right now is a good time. If it's been a while since you did training for your staff to talk about, hey, this is the situation we're in and here's some of the responsibilities you need to have. So education of employees and teaching them kind of anti-phishing stuff is a good idea. If I were to teach it, there's probably 5 things that I would tell our employees. One, thank you, Sandra. I forgot to ask that. Have they received training in cybersecurity stuff? So there's 5 questions I would ask or tell them. One is, we still have responsibilities to protect data, our data, the organization's data, our client's data, and that's data at rest and in motion. So don't be careless. Don't leave laptops around. Don't email sensitive data. Just because we're working from home doesn't mean you get a holiday. And we have a policy. We're like, don't email sensitive data ever. Email is generally insecure. So don't do it now. Number 2, be cautious about phishing, ransomware, financial manipulation. Sometimes it just takes someone telling you that. I tell our employees, myself and Rob, the president of AutoStar, will never email you and tell you to distribute money to someone. And really, it's probably a good time to remind them that just because we're working from home, that does not change, right? We will not email you and tell you to please cut a check to some organization for X thousands of dollars. I would tell them you still need to put proper controls in place. Oh, good. 73% had cybersecurity training. That's excellent. And tell them to be conscientious about phone calls, video calls with family members present in their house, right? Part of your responsibility is, don't have sensitive papers lying around your house. Don't talk about client data with family members around or things like that. I will give it up to my wife, who's really good at this stuff because she works for AHS and, always uses the example that even if she sees my mom in the hospital, even if it's just getting, coffee from Tim Hortons, she can't tell me. And so we should all endeavor to be like my wife and make sure that we don't talk about that stuff at home, and that we still need to worry about things like backups and disaster recovery processes and stuff. So now would be a good time to kind of maybe hit some of that with your employees again. The other thing is that you probably want to reduce paper usage if possible, because not all data breaches are cyber breaches, right? So if people have papers printed with sensitive data at home and they throw those in the garbage, well, they're, that potentially could get into the wrong hands. And the other is consider centralized management of devices. So there are a lot of options out there for centralized management of devices. Some of them, I would say none of them are great at this point. So you've got, for example, Microsoft Endpoint Manager. You've got Sophos Central. You've got PCmatic, which I think is free right now. You've got things like ConnectWise. They can all do certain things. Like, so for example, they can all say, for example, enforce that all of these computers that my people are running at home have antivirus on them. And it will not let them on your network unless they've got their antivirus up to date. Or they can, you can see there's a screenshot here. You can block pluggable devices into the computer. So I can say, no, you're not allowed to plug in a Bluetooth device or a USB device, right? Because maybe I want people not to be copying data to those devices. These are problematic for a number of reasons, especially if you're using personal devices. I don't think it's necessarily going to fly that you force people to install management software on their own personal devices. That is problematic, and some of them are good but not great. There are some issues. There's another one here. You can see this is a screenshot for Sophos Central. I'm not selling Sophos Central, by the way, but it does give you some nice capabilities. You can see I've got a list of computers here, and I can see what address they're at, what operating system they're on, and whether they've got endpoint protection, Intercept X, which is kind of like Sophos's firewall type stuff, and whether they're encrypted. And then I can see the user that's on. So there are some tools out there that are options that I've included those in the notes as well. Just a couple general notes to finish up. What tools and services are companies using to help with this transition? One of the things I noted is phone systems. So there may be a couple of options for employees to get their office phone to their home. This is something that we've done at AutoStar. It's not security specific. So what you need to do is ask your phone provider if you can use a soft phone client instead of a desk phone, or maybe in addition to. And that's what we use. So at AutoStar, we all connect with our VPN. And then once we're connected in with the VPN, we use some software. It's free. It's called Microsip. It works really well. And it's basically like, just like me talking to you right now. Through my computer, but when my phone at the office rings, it pops up on my screen and says, oh, you've got an incoming call from Sandra Milne, and I can talk to her just like I'm talking to you guys. They do need a headset and a microphone, so those are good options. If you can't do that, so if your phone system will not allow soft phones, and you can talk to whoever the company is that set up your phones. You can also ask them, can I just forward calls to an outside number? So the common examples, could I send sales calls, incoming sales calls to a cell phone? That is not as good, because now an incoming call takes one line to come in and one line to come out. So you're using up 2 of your lines. And if you have 10 total, now that one call is taking up 2 of your lines. But it's maybe an option, and probably better than nothing. And better than just, oh, well, you're going to have to call Sandra on her cell phone. The other option AutoStar did, which is a really smart idea, I'll give credit to this to one of the networking guys I work with. We set up these internal conference rooms so that when all our employees have their soft phone up, they don't tie up an outside line when they want to talk to each other. We just dial, the number is like, 22222, and then we give our password to it, and we can all join these kind of central conference rooms, and we don't tie up any outside lines to do it. And we do like daily meetings with different members of our staff where they just want to check in with each other every day for like 15 minutes. And this is what we do for that, and it works great. You can also use remote meeting software. All of these offer some combination of different tools like online screen sharing, audio, video conference, team chat, collaboration. A lot of these either have a free tier or they're free right now. So like one example is WebEx is free right now. And WebEx is normally expensive software for meetings just like this. If you've never used WebEx, it works just like kind of Zoom that we're in. So there's WebEx, there's Zoom, which by the way, the little star is because Zoom's had its own sort of controversial, some security stuff lately that you've probably heard about. I'm not actually convinced for the average person this is not going to be a major problem. Like I looked at what those security issues are, and for the average, if the security issue was somebody could join this meeting who wasn't invited, okay, right? I'm probably going to be okay with that. Or they go, well, the audio might be routing through China. Okay, like I'm not talking about anything super secret in this, so that's fine for. And when we use stuff like that for my college teaching remotely, I was fine with those kind of risks for different tools. There's GoToMeeting, Microsoft Teams is one. There's Skype, Google Hangouts. There's one I haven't used, but it's also, I believe, free right now called Intermedia AnyMeeting. And Slack is a very popular one, probably more among IT folk than maybe some others. So all of these will give you kind of some team chat, collaboration. For AutoStar, we had the suggestion for one of our employees. She doesn't have many good ideas, but she has good ideas every now and then. I say that because she's in the meeting today. But she said, hey, well, we all have like a group chat on Skype that we can just chat with each other whenever. And it's been really good. It's nice for our staff to be able to still talk to each other. Other good ideas. Okay, so these are all things that are outside of security specific, but they're just things AutoStar's done. So we have tools like fail to ban, which means after so many bad login attempts, we just ban IPs. In fact, we'll ban entire countries at times if they're really ticking us off. We use tools like Microsoft App Locker, which make it so that only programs that we allow to run on our network are allowed to run, and that greatly reduces the risk of ransomware. We're just putting in right now actually some network monitoring and benchmarking software because we've had a couple since we made this transition. Employees say, well, it's slow. And the problem is for me as an IT person, I don't know whether it's slow because your internet is slow or our internet is slow. And so until you've got some benchmarks and things like that, it's tough to do. So that's one thing that's maybe a good idea. I said to think about name resolution. So if your employees are used to connecting to things by name, so file server, they might need to know the IPs, so just be aware of that. Think about web-based or phone email options. So we use Outlook Web Access. You don't need a computer. And please, please continue to check your backups. So questions and answers and where we go from here. So I know there's been a couple questions as we go. One was just personal. Do I teach at the college only or somewhere else? Just at the college. Oh, and I help teach karate, but that's not going to help you from an IT standpoint. Sorry. And that's purely part-time as an enthusiastic amateur. And
we have
IT
in the Q&A, Ivan, it says, what sort of bandwidth loss is typical through a VPN, if any?
That's a good question. It's actually not bad with the new VPNs. And I should note this same kind of question with regards to performance loss from BitLocker. So it depends on the connection at the other end, but the overhead from being on a VPN itself is probably in the order of 10 to 20% more bandwidth will be used over a VPN. Now, one note with that, you've kind of got two types of VPNs out there. You've got kind of full channel and split channel, and I'll quickly explain the difference, or full tunnel or split tunnel. A split tunnel VPN is going to be better performance, but a little less secure, and here's why. Let's say I'm on my computer at home, and I'm VPN'd into AutoStar, and I open up YouTube. A split tunnel VPN says, hey, Ivan is trying to get to YouTube. That is not AutoStar. So I'm just going to let that connection go out through his regular internet connection, and I'm not going to put that through the VPN, right? A full tunnel VPN would say, once I'm connected on that VPN, any network traffic at all has to go all the way through AutoStar. But it's kind of like that phone line thing, where now if you think about that YouTube video coming in, let's say that YouTube video is running at 10 megs per second video. AutoStar has to take that 10 megs from YouTube and bring it into AutoStar, and then it has to push that 10 megs per second out to me. So that 10 megs per second of video has effectively doubled and become 20 megs per second. So if you're doing full tunnel, you will definitely see a lot more overhead. But overhead in general, 10 to 20% on a VPN. And that kind of leads me to one note. If you are using tools like BitLocker, a really common and good question is, well, if I'm using BitLocker, I'm encrypting this whole computer. How much is that going to slow the computer down? Because it used to be a lot. Like, it'll be half as fast as it otherwise would be. The new stuff is actually really good, and computers have gotten faster. So the estimate now for things like BitLocker, if I encrypt this entire computer, how much slower is it going to be? You're going to notice a sub 10% performance decrease. So somewhere in the order of 5 to 10% slower, which is, considering what it's doing, every single bit of data that I read and write off the disk is getting encrypted or decrypted. It's pretty good. There's also a question, IT suggestions or recommendations for home-based businesses. I'm not sure, sorry, what the question means. Any thoughts there, Sandra?
No, but they could clarify while I throw up this last poll if you want.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yes, the last one. Have you noticed an increase of cyber attacks in your organization? This one might be tough, because, I would notice, but, I get firewall logs and look at the data and things like that. Some of you may or may not know. Certainly, I know there's a couple people who are in the IT business in here that I see from the panel, so you guys might have. Other people, I'm not sure. We'll see.
Ooh, neck and neck.
I haven't seen the results yet. Is it still coming?
Oh, yeah. I'll give it another couple of seconds and then I'll end the poll. It's pretty close.
I didn't know you got it live. That's cool.
And sharing results.
So 46% said yes, they've noticed more attacks. Maybe that's even just on personal devices and things like that. 62% said no, which isn't too surprising. Like I said, if you're not an IT person, it's sometimes hard to know because You don't see your firewall logs and things like that. And I noted the future, where we go from here. I had an interesting discussion, I think, with someone the other day. I think this is, and a lot of people have said, they think that this is really going to change things in the future for both good and bad, you know, for individuals and people. So this might really kick off a long-term trend in remote working, which is good for employees, but also bad for employees. You know, my comment to that person was, I said you know, if you're the type of person who always thought, well, my job could never be outsourced, right? And you're working from home right now, you have now learned that your job can be outsourced. Because if you can do it from home, somebody could do it from somewhere else. And so that is, you know, there could be some long-term things in here. Benjamin also asked, what security issues do you find with FTP? Oh, there's so many. Don't even get me started. FTP is a horrible protocol because there's absolutely zero security built into FTP. Is the, by the way, it's file transfer protocol, not something about the police. So in the file transfer protocol, it was really designed in the early 1980s, maybe even before. There is zero encryption. And so FTP is the first example. When I do that lab with my class where we do like network traffic capture and sniffing, and we show how bad it is, FTP is example number one, because I get them all to go to an FTP site while they run network sniffers, and they all get each other's passwords, 100%. And it's not a maybe they do it, or, you know, if they kind of do it the right way. It's like from my, I use a Linux distribution called Kali Linux. It's literally put the box on the network and type one command line, and you will get every FTP password that happens to go across that network. So, yeah. So use instead, by the way, you can use FTPS, which is FTP secure, or there's another protocol, strangely, called SFTP, or there's another one called SCP, and those are all way, way, way better. And by the way, my company, we write software for the pharmacy and grocery industry. You'd be surprised how many times we get like wholesalers or suppliers or organizations like that who say, hey, we need an upload from a bunch of stores, and it needs to contain, you know, like ultimately like PII, personally identifiable information. So, you know, a list of all the customers and what they bought and things like that. And we use this for analysis purposes. And my first question is always, how are we transferring this file? If they say FTP, out of the question, like we won't even consider it, right? And we shame them for even asking such a stupid question.
Well, I don't see any more questions, and I see it's 10 after 1, and I really appreciate you coming on to provide this information today, Ivan, and I hope we'll be able to have you back to either even give this one again or to maybe go a little deeper into it. This one will be available to people as soon as I can figure out how to use my all of my my programs properly, but I see that you've put up your email addresses, so if people have questions they can get in touch with you. Yep,
absolutely.
Wonderful.
And I'll send the slide deck to you, Sandra, and that way you Perfect. Can forward the link to whoever wants it.
I will do that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We really appreciate it. That was a lot of really great information today.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks everybody for attending.